2 years ago, Chainalysis estimated that 1% of blockchain transactions were linked to illegal activities. And 1% is a big number because of the absolute number of transactions that happen. So 1% might not sound like a lot, but when the number of transactions is so enormous, it really is a lot. So 2 years ago, estimated that 1% of blockchain transactions were linked to illegal activities. So things like ransomware and NFT, non-fungible token wash trading. So what are those things? What's NFT wash trading? What's ransomware? How are these things facilitated by blockchain transactions? Why are they a problem?
So it's funny that you say 1% is small. I mean, is large, because a lot of people say that's so small, but I'm like, what is the right number? That you would say, hey, that feels right. And so, yeah, that's about $14 billion last year in illicit activity across 10 different, or sorry, 10 or 11, I can't quite remember, different types of illicit activity. Let's see if I can name them off. You did NFT washing, ransomware, but we also have scams, stolen funds, sanctioned activity, terrorist financing, child abuse materials, hacking, and malware. So there's many different types of illicit activity that happen on the blockchain.
It is super impressive that you just reeled those off. For people who aren't watching the video version of this, which is most of you listeners, Kim did that on her fingers. That she wasn't looking at notes. She was just counting on her fingers up to 10 or 11.
Darknet marketplaces, fraud shops, or two
There we
more.
go.
I think those are all of them. Yeah, no, so there's a lot of different variety in crime. So when people say how much crime is happening, it's you want to give one number, but each of those components of crime are really different. So obviously, terrorist financing is really different from an NFT wash trade. And so just some definitions. NFT wash trading is or wash trading in general is when you create you create fake volumes around an asset being traded. So if I launch an NFT, no one's going to buy my dumb NFT. They're not going to want to buy it if there's no, unless they love the art that I make, there's not going to, unless there's a promise of return. So if I buy and sell my own NFT on a platform hundreds of times, then a bot, there's a lot of bots that are lurking in the crypto space because anyone can build one and might pick up on that and then buy one of my NFTs. So we're able to quantify that, which is actually a pretty new thing that we're working on, and I think that it's a domain that I'd like to linger on a little bit from a data science perspective. But the other types of crime are ransomware. That's when someone downloads, when you accidentally download a malware and your computer gets locked unless you pay a ransom, which is almost always, definitely always in cryptocurrency. And hacking is obviously a big cryptocurrency exchange was hacked, darknet marketplace buying drugs online, fraud shops buying stolen credit cards online. Scams are people saying, hey, you want to make 100% returns every day for life. And then it's not the case. So there's a lot of variety, and all of those are driven and impacted by different factors.
Interesting. And Chainalysis works with law enforcement organizations to help them trace some of these transactions into the real world. So even though the blockchain has some anonymity, so this came up in Philip's episode a bit, that even though a wallet on its own is anonymous, that wallet might do transactions with a known entity, so like an exchange, and some entities have legal requirements to keep information on the counterparties that they do transactions with. So you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, or if I'm saying anything incorrectly, but it sounds like Chainalysis can work with law enforcement agencies to help them trace, the root of some transaction, and then the FBI or whoever in the real world can then, follow up with exchanges, counterparties, and get to the bottom of who actually is ultimately responsible for this crime that's happened.
Yeah, I'd say that's right. So it kind of manifests in two distinct ways in our customers. One is if you come across a crime scene and there's a cryptocurrency wallet and you want to get to the bottom of it, you'll use our software to basically follow the money. Where did those funds come from? And then maybe the exchange that sourced the funds will have some sort of personally identifiable information on that individual, which can lead to, so you got the investigation side of things, and then you have the compliance side of things. So if you're an exchange, you're regulated by the Banking Secrecy Act, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. You're not allowed to receive terrorist financing sanctioned funds. It's just a non-starter. You can't do that. But how do you know if the cryptocurrency from the string of alphanumeric letters and numbers is a sanctioned address or not? Well, you put it in our software, we'll tell you where those funds came from, and then you can kind of build an automatic transaction monitoring system. So anything that has traces of any of those illicit activities, you can then get an alert, freeze those accounts, offboard them, not allow them to get processed, and allow your company to remain compliant.
Cool. That was a really eloquent explanation of how that works. Much better than mine. I'm glad to have you run through that.
Well, you were talking about, and we talk about wallets as entities too. So, yeah.
I talk about everything as entities. What isn't an entity?
That's a really good point. Everything is an entity.
It's a word I used to sound smarter than if I just say thing.
Well, we use entity in our actually in our internal dialogue. So we have internal and external dialogue. So things like clusters or entities or TXIDs. And so we have all of these concepts that you have to really learn. Like that's an internal concept that and that's an versus an external concept. So I'm just impressed I haven't used the word cluster. That's a good thing.
What is it? Can you spill the beans on that?
Sure. A cluster is what we call basically a cluster of addresses. So what we do at Chainalysis is we associate addresses together. And we do that through 5-6 different heuristics. Some of them are manual, some of them are automatic. That's when you're getting into the more data science world. I'll give you an example. There's a concept called co-spending, where if two addresses spend the same transaction output together in the same transaction, you can know that they're connected to those are two addresses must be controlled by the same individual. So we'll associate those together and put them in one cluster. And a cluster is a series of wallets. Clusters can have millions, 10 million addresses in every single one. And so that's at the heart of what Chainalysis is doing. Is so if you, like we talked about at the top of the call, anyone can plug into this data set, but you won't know which addresses are associated with each other without running a whole bunch of heuristics over the entire history of the data set, which is something that is just kind of prevents a lot of people from being able to draw the conclusions that we're able to draw.
Yeah, because they have to come up with the heuristics, which requires some expertise. And then even once they've come up with the heuristics, running over on a big blockchain like the Bitcoin blockchain, on the blockchain, it's would be an enormous computational expense to go over all the history and identify where co-spending is occurring, for example. Much cheaper to work with a tool like Chainalysis provides to be able to quickly get the results of all of your intellectual property and computational work.
It would be computationally expensive, but also there's other heuristics that we employ to get attribution, what we call attribution. I think that's another internal word, where we identify what the name of the service is. So who controls those 10 million addresses? So it's a hard one data set that is really 7 years and 8 years in the making now. So, and every day it grows tremendously.